Yeah.
Yeah, I told them for an hour and a half.
Everybody hear me? Hi guys, we'll get this started. My name is April. I'm the chair of the school board, and we're here tonight for the public hearing for the Winchester tuition agreement. Thanks for coming. This is to get the public's input on the agreement. Dr. Ryan's going to do a presentation, and then we'll get input from you guys after that's presented. It's probably the cleanest way to do it. We have the school board. We have Kayla Hemwell, Mark Sprague, Wayne Dingman, and Kendra Gardner. And then from the Winchester School Board, we have Karen Jerome and Rob Bushy. Thanks for coming. So at this point, I'm just going to hand it over to Ryan, Dr. Ryan, to start the presentation.
Good. Thank you very much. Nice to see everyone here. I was very happy to go through a very similar presentation last Thursday in Winchester. I want to highlight Dr. Karen Jerome, chair of that board, also Mr. Bushy is here as a board member, Lindsay Picard, who was on the high school selection committee, but also wears several hats in the town of Winchester, so thanks for coming out. And the rest of our friends that might be here from Winchester, but also from Hinsdale for certain, because this is really more about the impact this will have on your tax bill, which seems to be the focus, or is the focus of our presentation, surrounded by what is the best turnout or the best opportunity for all of our high school students in both of our towns. It's become evident that in the state of New Hampshire, the funding mechanism for schools, as you know, is becoming smaller and smaller, tighter every year. This year, there's language in Concord that actually changes the definition of what special education is in an attempt to eliminate some of those disabilities that we've typically funded so that the state no longer has to fund those specific disabilities, which will reduce adequacy as well as IDEA money, which is special ed funding from the feds, even more. So that's going to be more money coming out of people's pockets. So we're trying to forecast down the road what those impacts are. And when we have the opportunity as a community to bring in revenue for a good reason, that's going to reduce what you pay out of your pocket to operate our schools. And so that's going to be the overall goal of this program. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through the elements of the tuition agreement that's going to help us get there. So as the superintendent in Hinsdale and in Winchester, I get to wear both hats, but I have the same interest in what we're trying to do, and that's to make sure that we can provide the very best high-level educational opportunities for all of our students so that they can be promising, successful in our communities, perhaps leave the community to go learn more, whether it be in college, in a trade school, working, or in the military, and then return to support and broaden our community. That's my goal as superintendent. I've been charged by both boards to do that in an efficient and economical way, but also to provide high levels of student achievement. And so we have our work cut out for us. But that's what we're going to try to do, and this is the first step of several in our strategic planning process as we move forward with the rest of this school year and into next. So tonight, what we will walk through is basically give an introduction. How did we get here? To fill in some of the blanks, perhaps, that people have, if they have not been following the story of the Winchester School District and their high school, their high school contract with the Keene School District. We'll talk about specific elements of the agreement. So I'll pull some things out. All of this, by the way, has been posted on our website. The agreement, the draft agreement, has been up for almost a month. So I'm just going to be highlighting some of those things that are in there that we feel is most important tonight. We'll talk about the financial implications, what revenue means to Hinsdale and how it's calculated towards the operating costs of the school district. And then a general summary, just a couple of takeaways that we're asking you to consider as we close up the public hearing and you enter into the input and feedback stage, as well as your questions that we'll have tonight. I've talked about some of the folks that are on, that are here representing different school boards, but I want to make sure that we highlight that the tuition agreement committee is made up of Winchester and Hinsdale folks, staff, and school board members. There was 4 meetings that we were able to accomplish a draft agreement because both sides went in wanting it to be more of a partnership than anything else. This was very different from any kind of collective bargaining agreement where one side is trying to get more from the other side. This was walking into an understanding that we are all trying to do the best we can, and by cost sharing, we can do that at the lowest cost possible. So I want to thank the members of the committee that worked on that and committed that time. So to bring us into where we are, in 2019, the Hinsdale School Board and the superintendent at the time, well before several members of this board and myself were on staff, reached out to the community here in Hinsdale to join their tuition exploratory committee. What Hinsdale's been trying to do for the last 6 years is find an opportunity to bring other students in for tuition dollars to help lower the cost of the tax burden. So this, you may recognize some names up there, or Anne Marie Diorio, as well as Wayne Woolridge, was the superintendent at the time. So this work started well before we arrived. And I think there had been some either introductory discussions or there were absolutely some meetings that took place between that time and up until about 2023. So there was a lot of exploring, but there was nothing really coming to fruition, okay? They were able to put together a tuition exploratory committee. They met in June of 2023. I was hired in July of 2023, and one of the first things I was asked is, will you continue that work? I said, of course. And so we did have some preliminary meetings with the Winchester Administration School Board in that fall and again in that winter. What Winchester was trying to do was work with the Keene School District to get choice. They wanted to be able to have some of their students attend a high school other than Keene High School because it was a better fit for those students. Keene was an all or none tuition agreement. It was a 20-year agreement that required 100% of the students from Winchester, unless they were headed to a special program such as an independent school, a private school, or a charter school. They all had to attend Keene High School. Keene School Board wouldn't budge. And so Lindsay Picard, who was here, who was the chair of the board at the time, had met with the administration and the board in Keene to try and negotiate something different. They decided, they being Keene, that in March 2024, that they were not going to be renewing that 20-year agreement. This is exactly how Winchester found out. There wasn't any conversation prior to it becoming public. So Winchester had to do something. They had to put together a plan on how they were going to educate their high school students. By law, every community has to have either funds set aside to pay tuition for students to attend a high school, or they have to have a high school themselves in their own community. And so they were faced with, we need to look for another place for our students because obviously we're not renewing the contract with Keene. So the high school search committee was formed in July, and over the course of 6 months, they had a search process. They investigated 5 schools, Hinsdale being one of them, to find out where was the best fit going to be, what was going to be the best possible location for our kids in Winchester to attend. 2 of the schools opted not to participate. That's Keene and Franklin County Tech. Franklin County is a little bit far away. They're a full application school. Franklin County did say, however, they would like a couple of students from Winchester and Hinsdale to attend if they were so inclined. The 3 schools that were participating were Monadnock, Hinsdale, and Monadnock, Hinsdale, and Pioneer Valley, which is in Northfield. At the conclusion of that 6 months, and after hearing a lot of input from students, families, having the opportunity to visit with people at their respective schools as well as have them visit Winchester, the committee unanimously selected Hinsdale for their high school students to attend. The board then voted unanimously on that approval, and so it's Hinsdale that they wanted to move forward with in developing a tuition agreement. So we have a timeline now that we're up against. We've talked about how the committee already worked on the agreement, and that's what you have before you today in draft form. We're meeting tonight to have the opportunity to participate in that conversation, to hear your input, answer your questions or any concerns that you have with the agreement. The board will take all of that into consideration. Public hearing will close, and then at 6 p.m., or if we extend beyond 6, 10 minutes after the public hearing ends, the board will have its normal board meeting in which they will vote on whether or not to move forward with the agreement. At which point there will be a special meeting on May 13th, which will be again in here at 6 p.m. And the town will vote on yes or no on accepting that agreement. From that point, it has to go up to the State Board of Education in Concord, and it has to be approved on the consent agenda with the State Board of Ed, and it has to be signed by the chair of the State Board as well as the commissioner. The reason why we're here in April having this work done for the June board agenda is because on October 1st, Winchester has to provide a census to Keene of the number of students that will be attending Keene High School the following year. That's by contract, because the contract's still in force. And we negotiated an addendum that allows Winchester to send students to their anchor school should they have one in place prior to October 1st in the fall. So families of our 7th graders in Winchester really want to see an agreement done so that they can move on to their new high school by the time they get to be freshmen, which would be the 26-27 school year. So there are a lot of dominoes that had to fall before we even got to this, and a lot more that still have to fall in the right direction. So I'll talk a little bit about the actual agreement. We'll pull out some elements of the agreement. The first being the term. So you can see the first is for 7 years. The committee originally talked about a 5-year term, but there's a 2-year severance. In other words, one of the districts can say, we think we need to see other people. And so we need to give 2 years notice for that. And the committee said, well, if it's a 5-year term, 3 years isn't really going to be enough for us to put together enough data or correct things that might not be going well. So the 5-year term doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. That's where the committee said, well, 7 years makes a lot more sense because we can go through at least 2 cycles of 4-year grads to really have an opportunity to iron out any bumps, to fix any problems, to address any concerns. And if after 5 years it's still not going well, then there's that 2-year severance notification. Gives us in Hinsdale the opportunity to adjust our revenue and our budget and decide how we want to deal with that after we lose that revenue 2 years later. And it gives Winchester the opportunity to begin the process all over. And so at the conclusion of that 7th year, they'll be looking to renew it for 10, and then 10 every year. Historically, it's been a 20-year deal. CTE programs such as Chester Career Center, Seacoast School of Technology, the state levels required a 20-year agreement, and they just passed 3 years ago. They decided 20 years was too long. I don't know if anybody's going to argue with that. And so they've reduced the number to 10 or fewer. So we would max it to 10. In looking at the costs, Winchester's tuition requires 2 different payments. A regular education student next year, Winchester School Board pays $18,486. If it's a special education student, regardless of the services that they're receiving, the payment is $33,616. So if you have a student who receives an hour of speech every other week for the school year, you're paying $33,616 for that student. If you have another student who is wheelchair bound, tube-fed, nonverbal, receiving care throughout the day with a one-on-one paraprofessional, you're paying $33,616. And in the high school level, particularly here at Hinsdale, we don't have as much in terms of special education costs than we would say at the elementary or even the middle school level. And so in order to equalize that, in Hinsdale, the cost is going to be we believe $17,850 by the 26-27 school year, which is what our per pupil cost is with all of the other factors backed out and prorated for the percentage of the students from Winchester's amount toward those costs. And I have an expert right to my left who can explain that when that question comes up during public input. And so we prepared that for all students. And then in terms of special education, any student who receives special education services, we've already costed out what each of those services is. And so in a student's IEP, we'll calculate how much of each of those services will cost for the course of the year. And that will be invoiced to Winchester, and they'll pay that direct cost. That will not be borne by the taxpayers of Hinsdale. And so all students from Winchester who attend Hinsdale who receive special education services will be paid for by Winchester. And I just explained all of that on this slide as well. In terms of capital costs, this clause in the agreement is more of a protection for both communities. And this is in the event that the 2 boards talk to each other and say, listen, we have a lot of students from Winchester who are coming to Hinsdale. We need to add on, we need to build this, and the 2 boards agree. They then decide to go after a bond. Both towns have to approve that bond. If one town doesn't, then that doesn't happen. Building doesn't happen. If it does, if both communities say that's a great idea, we're going to support that. And then there's remodeling or reconstruction here at the high school. Winchester will pay its proportional cost over the life of the bond, whether Winchester stays in the agreement or not. Because there is some situations in the state where tuition to town says, yes, we agree, we need that remodeling. and then they end their agreement and there was nothing in there to require them to continue to pay toward the life of that bond, they leave that district with the entire bill. And so what we've done is we've built in the language that protects Hinsdale so that Hinsdale isn't left with the bill, holding the entire amount, that Winchester agrees. Now, in terms of normal or routine maintenance costs, we bear that as Hinsdale. We have a capital improvement plan. We already costed that out. Those are items that we're going to be paying for the school. But anything additional because of an increase in the number of students, Winchester contributes to that. Also in the agreement is some billed accountability. The outreach and communication is going to begin with the 8th grade students on September 1. Should this agreement pass, we'll know from Winchester who all of the 8th graders are. Ms. Roth, who's the principal here at the middle high school, she'll begin reaching out with her team to all of the 8th graders and families and start inviting them onto campus. There'll be opportunities for them to be in school during school. There'll be opportunities for them to come to activities. There'll be opportunities for them to participate in a freshman orientation the following summer with our rising 8th graders from Hinsdale and begin building that freshman community prior to freshman year starting. So we'll have students who already know each other, if not through athletics in other capacity before that, but certainly get to know who they are over the course of those activities in the summer and then beginning freshman year. There's also a piece of the school year calendar, which will tie in with Winchester. They'll follow the high school or the district calendar here. Next year, we're going to be working again with Wyndham Regional Career Center. And so we'll be tying our calendar to WRCC. We've renegotiated with the Career Center to increase the number of students who are participating in CTE classes there at a lower cost. We're going to continue to grow that number over the next 4 to 5 years. And we're going to be looking to expand programming for some students in some specialized CTE programs on the Winchester campus. So not only will we have students participating in CTE in Brattleboro, but we'll have some from Brattleboro and Hinsdale and Winchester in newly founded programs on the Winchester campus. And so there's going to be more opportunity for kids to participate in those types of programs. We'll have the opportunity to work with Winchester. Our teachers have already started talking to each other, starting to share some of the best practices that they follow in their instruction. We looked at the opportunity to potentially share materials, share some costs around programming, professional development. So if you have someone coming in to run professional development at a certain cost, if we add more teachers to it, it's a less per teacher cost. That way, there's a number of different sharing programs that we're looking at between the two districts, all with the goal of lowering cost and raising collaboration. Speaking of collaboration in terms of governance, the Winchester board had 0 representation on the teen school board. What we've built into the agreement is that there'll be a joint school board meeting 3 times a year where the 2 boards will come together. Any community member who wants to come and address, so Winchester or Hinsdale families want to come and address the joint board about what's going on in high school, well, that'll be a forum for that. But it'll also be an opportunity for the 2 boards to talk to each other about anything that's coming down the road. Ms. Roth will present to the board, the joint board, all of the things that are happening in the high school, so the communication is open. And then any decisions about the high school that are going to be made that would affect students, particularly from Winchester, will be discussed at those meetings as well. And then there'll also be a school board representative, 1 member of the Winchester School Board, serving as a non-voting member for high school matters on the Hinsdale School Board. Someone in Winchester asked why can't it be a voting member, and in order for that to happen, there has to be a constitutionally driven process for a joint school board to be formed, or the town of Hinsdale, the elected body, or the legislative body, has to vote to give voting power to someone who doesn't live in the town. And that's a really rocky road to go down. That's not something that I think we're really most interested in right now. But there will be representation from the Winchester School Board for high school matters. In terms of financial implications, we looked at this as an opportunity, again, to bring down the cost of sending students to high school for those who live in Winchester, and to reduce the tax rate for those who are paying taxes of the folks here in Hinsdale. Essentially, based on our current projections, and again, using the 80% rule, which means 80% of the public high school students from Winchester would be required to attend Hinsdale. Of that number right now, in the 7th grade, we would be looking at 80% of their 31 students coming to Hinsdale their freshman year, which would be a tuition cost of $428,400. Keeping things constant, that represents roughly $1 reduction in the school tax rate for that tax year, because it takes away almost $500,000 of taxes that need to be raised by you in your property tax bill. Keeping the tuition rate constant over the course of the 3 years to remain conservative, because we can't predict what increase there'll be to the high school tuition, because right now we don't know what the FY 28, 29, or 30 high school budget will be. But whatever increase takes place in the high school budget will also be the taxable increase on the tuition costs. So if the high school budget goes up 2%, the tuition cost goes up 2%. So as a number goes up, so does the tuition cost, to maintain that proportional cost reduction in the tax impact. And so after 4 years, again, being conservative and remaining constant, there's almost a $2 million reduction in what the total taxable amount would be, which is this year coming up is $8.7 million. Using that number and reducing that by the 1.963, you can see that at an $18.40 tax rate, there could be $4 or more reduced from your local tax rate, and that's $4 per thousand. So for a $300,000 house, I wouldn't mind saving the $200 a month extra that I'd be paying in taxes and putting it back in my pocket. Working on this with Jane Fortson, our business administrator, we believe it's a conservative estimate. There could be more. However, we also don't understand what's happening in Concord and the adequacy money that they're trying to reduce that they send to school districts. So we always want to be mindful of that. In looking at what cost items exist, all associated costs with attendance will be paid by Winchester on behalf of their students. And so we've listed all of the things that if students are participating and they are from Winchester, Winchester is paying those costs. Special education services, placements, and transportation, career and technical ed tuition, of which we get 75% back from the state. So we're responsible for only 25% of that student's tuition, which is why we're able to send more students. Transportation to and from Hinsdale High School if they so choose, because as high school students, we're not required by law to transport. However, if we want to get our students to school, and there's a 6-mile road between us and the center of town, we want to make sure that we get them. Percentage of any capital improvements required to meet new demands of expanding enrollment, and costs for any additional faculty and staff get included into that per pupil tuition cost. Because when we add staff, we add expense. And on the expense side, we have to balance it with revenue. And that's where their tuition costs would go up. So what we've tried to do is just paint a picture of the partnership that started between the two school boards. There was nothing competitive between the two. I think Dr. Jerome shared at the last public hearing we had in Winchester that it was very easy and both boards got what they wanted out of that agreement. And in looking at, speaking of the number of students at our projected enrollment in 26-27, looking at a freshman class of 63. So gradually building up to a max size of 277, which is still far less than the number that was here, if I'm not mistaken, prior to the addition being put on into the school. I think we had some students here at that time. So some of the key takeaways that I'd like you to consider is the space we have in the school is ample, not only by New Hampshire school education regulations, but also by average class size. We're currently running an average class size in our building at 11.4 students per classroom. So when we're talking about adding 24 students in the freshman class, we may need to shift the teacher's schedule to add an additional section of English 1 and Algebra 1 to keep that class enrollment down below 20. But it does not mean needing to add space, and it does not mean needing to add staff. The agreement represents a significant savings, and we're not sacrificing achievement, we're actually increasing opportunity. Imagine being able to have our 8th graders participate in middle school athletics instead of being asked to come up and fill spots on a varsity level against 17 and 18-year-olds, or JV level against 15-year-olds. Being able to have a full band, we have a good-sized band, this will round out our band, put on a full program with more music, more opportunities, more clubs and activities for students after school, because when we increase the number of participants, we can increase the number of opportunities. When we have too few students, we can't offer even some of the classes that we want to, because there might be 3 or 4 students in that classroom. And that becomes a heavy cost per pupil, which we know people don't like to endure. By adding more students, you bring your per pupil cost down. The alliance between the two towns, this could lead to other cost sharing, other cost savings between perhaps the 2 highway departments, between the 2 town clerks, where they're talking about different cost structures, sharing of things. We live in a part of the state that I don't feel we get a lot of support from the center, to the point where we're building our own regional safety and security campus team to ensure that if there's ever a threat here, that we have to kind of fight for ourselves till the response comes. There's only so much HPD can do, and the response time around us is a lot slower than I would like it to be. So we're feeling economically that that's something that we need to do as well. And so by joining forces with Winchester in an agreement such as this, I think it's going to potentially spur on some additional opportunities for both towns to save money and build up services. And then, of course, we talked about the course offerings. 2 years ago when I arrived, we had 1 advanced placement course, and there were 2 students enrolled in it. Last year, we added and offered and ran this year 7 advanced placement courses. Next year, we're able to offer between here and on our AP Rural network that we've built 14 advanced placement courses and multiple students participating in those. If we can infuse another 120 students over the course of 4 years, we'll have full, robust, high-level courses, as well as more electives for kids to be able to participate in terms of their interests. So, I want to remind you again of the timeline. And if I keep talking, we're going to exceed that May 13th. So we're going to get to questions. But again, tonight's hearing, May 13th, is the special school district meeting. Should the board approve it tonight? And head it up to the State Board of Education. If the agreement is not approved and it fails, let's say if it fails tonight, it will delay the process and we'll be up against that October 1 deadline. If at voting it fails, then Winchester will be forced to develop memorandum of understanding or memoranda of understanding with several different towns. It means we wouldn't have the revenue coming in because our town will have voted no. We don't want tuition students coming from Winchester, and therefore the market will bear the cost that Winchester pays, which could be a lot more than what they're paying now. So with that, I'll yield the microphone back to the chair. And we'll answer any questions, and certainly love to hear what your feedback on what we presented to you tonight.
So at this time, if anybody has any questions, if you could just come to the mic, state your name and your address, and we'll go from there.
Joe, 59 Old Stage Road here in Hinsdale. And I want to first say I'm fully in support of the agreement. And Dr. Ryan did touch on my point, but I want to reiterate it. As someone who's worked in education for over 30 years and served as the elementary principal, I fully understand the value of collaboration between communities. But I offer a word of caution, not about the agreement, but about how we implement it. We can't simply drop 30 or so new kids into the school each year and expect everything to just fall right into place. For this to be successful, both our current students and future students, as well as staff, we really need a thoughtful, proactive transition plan. That means time and space for relationship building, student to student, teacher to student, staff to staff, advisory groups, team building activities, joint orientation days, which you mentioned, whatever it takes to ensure that kids feel like they really belong. I think that's really critical, and in my experience, relationships mean so much. I do believe that agreement has potential to strengthen both communities, as mentioned, but only if we treat it more than just an enrollment number or projected revenues, and really invest in helping everyone feel like they're part of one school family. Thank you.
Hi. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. My name is Russell Black. I have owned property in this town since 1970. My children went here to Hinsdale. The last child I had here was in 1993. At that time, my home and property taxes was $1,200 a year. Now, me and my wife are both 75 years old, retired, thought we were doing pretty good. We were hard workers. Now it's hard to keep up with the taxes we have. It's almost to the point where do you pay your town taxes or do you eat? I have to believe there's a lot more older people, very similar to me, that they thought they were doing pretty darn good. They thought, hey, you know, we built up a slush fund for our 75-year-old. It don't work that way no more. Do I believe in education? Yes, like I said, I had kids that went to this school. In fact, my wife graduated from this school in 1970. So I married her right out of high school, bought a little house, and my taxes, house and property, was $204 a year. It's gone out of hand. Now, what else I think has gone out of hand is our local politicians, school boards, right up to the governor of the state. Even the federal government has decided that they have so much waste and fraud and abuse that they're going to dump the money back into the state and let the state figure out how to educate the kids. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'm not. So, me and my wife, like I said, we thought we were very hard workers. Put the nest egg away, it's all gone. Whose fault is it? Yours. Yours. Y'all thought that you were doing a good thing, but every town meeting I come to, oh, we need a new fire truck. Yep, go for it. Oh, we need a new fire station. Yep, go for it. Oh, we need a new police station. Yep, go for it. And all of a sudden, the taxes go from $1,200 a year to $6,400 a year, of which 2/3 of that taxes go to this school. $4,000 out of that $6,000 goes to this school. And I haven't had a kid in this school since 1993. Think about it. Thank you.
I like all of that. Jane Parker, 20 Tower Hill Road, Hinsdale. I have a couple of questions. One, what's the cost per pupil right now in Hinsdale? In the high school?
For the high school. Just under. Can you hear me? No. Is it on?
It's kind of twofold, because if you were to look at our state number, it's gonna be higher than what our actual number is, because the state number is going to include grants. As part of this tuition agreement, we don't do grants because we wouldn't bill somebody for something that we're getting for free, which we know is not for free, it's just from a different pocket, but. In going through our calculations, in order to arrive at this, we had to back out quite a few things. So our real number is 24,095. I think was what the state said for the
Per
school.
pupil for the high school.
Per pupil for the district. Now, the elementary school, middle school, high school all have different amounts. For this agreement, what we did is I took our actual cost for the high school. I backed out anything that had to do with special ed. I backed out anything that had to do with vocational. And I took out, I basically said, okay, now I'm left with the bones, because we're going to be billing back special ed, so I didn't want to include that in our number. So then I have to take that number, because we have blended classes. We have some middle school teachers that teach some high school classes and vice versa. So it's a blended amount. So what I do at that point is I say, okay, what portion is middle school and what portion is high school based on the number of kids? It's the only way I can really come about to an actual cost. Using that number, I was able to develop what the high school cost is. What we need to do then is add back the SAU costs, the technology costs, the building and grounds costs, and the special ed costs for just our special ed director and the administrative assistant, because they do the entire district. There's no way to pull them specifically out and say this portion is high school. So I've then taken those total costs and allocated 31%. The 31% represents the number of high school students to the total students in the whole district. Taken that number, added it to that high school original number that we had, come out with a dollar amount. Then taking that dollar amount, I can then divide and say, what's our cost per pupil estimated? So our cost per pupil is 20,116. That would be next year's projected number without any Hinsdale students. Oh, sorry, Winchester students. In order to project this, I kind of have to use the same numbers because I don't know what we're going to be at 26, 27 right now. So I take our projected high school Hinsdale students, add in 24 Winchester students, because we're looking at 31 and 80% round down to 24. So I'm now projecting, instead of using 162 students projected for Hinsdale, I'm using 186 students and arriving at 17,520. So it's bringing down our actual cost per student about $2,600. And then the number we used here, we added a projected 2% as a possibility for 26, 27, because we haven't developed that budget or voted on it at this point. So we kind of have to make some projections at this point.
So we really don't know how many Winchester students are coming to Hinsdale for the high school.
No, we will be given a number, November 1. October 1st is like the date that the state puts their numbers in, or the districts put into the state their numbers. They certify, I think, by October 15th. So both districts would have a better idea of what they have for students for the next year. At that point, Winchester will let us know November 1st what we're looking at for a number, so we can then build that into our budget, because we're going to build in 80% of that number.
So we don't even know how many with IEPs that are coming to the school then.
No, and what's gonna happen with the IEPs, I backed out all special ed except for the director and the admin assistant. So any costs that we incur based on an IEP, so if a student has a paraprofessional and they have, say, speech services, those services will be billed back at their cost. So whatever the cost of that paraprofessional is, including their benefits, that will be billed separately to Winchester. So it will be a
So
one
if
pass.
we don't know how many students are coming, we don't know how many IEPs, how can we possibly even guess for a tuition in right now? I mean, to me, if you're gonna put out numbers for the tuition per student, you gotta have more numbers than what you have right now, I would think. Because what if there's not, the numbers are off? What if you've got in your mind that you want these numbers, but they're off, but that tuition is set in stone?
The tuition will not be set in stone, it will be based
Well, what
on
is being voted on then?
the tuition agreement in that we will be charging the tuition that is going to be incurred at the high school level. The special ed costs have been pulled out of that base tuition. Those are being billed separately. We will get 100% of our cost back on this.
It just seems weird that you still don't have numbers on how many students, how many of this, how many of that, but yet you're still stuck on that $17,000 tuition. I just don't know how you can even estimate that right now, because you don't know the number of students or IEPs or anything like that.
Jane, it's based on this year's numbers for the high school. Projected with their seventh grade enrollment current. So that's how we come up with the 17. We did because we don't have a budget for the year that they'll actually be here, and we'll develop that next year. So the number that we're basing this on is this year's number. This will the budget that we projected for next year, based on their seventh grade enrollment current. So it's an estimate and it's a projected amount.
But the 17,000 per student is an estimate. That's like,
No,
that's gonna be the tuition.
that's the base rate for the tuition.
Now, we're looking at 26 to 30, 2030. Now, say 2030, everything goes up, does their tuition go up?
Yes.
In the same proportion too, so if they go, whatever percentage it goes up, their tuition also goes up. So we won't go into early.
All right, thank you.
Mary White, Middle Oxbow Road. One question that, the first thing you mentioned about figuring costs was just assuming that the grants were coming in. Are these state or federal grants, and how sure are we that those grants would be coming in?
We have no information that they're not coming in at this point. And in figuring our tuition, all grants have been backed out of it because I can't, or nobody should, in good conscience, say to Winchester, oh, $3 million of our costs for grants, but we're going to bill that to you even though we're not having to pay that out of pocket. So those numbers have all been taken out.
Okay, so you didn't count those grants
No.
as receiving, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I thought that was the first thing that you deducted.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Thank you.
I'm Tim Crowley from Northfield Road. Does Winchester vote like Hinsdale?
Winchester is an SB2 town, and so they have a deliberative session that's coming up on April 19th, and then they'll have an all-day voting session by ballot on May 17th.
So then we vote. It's Hinsdale. So obviously both towns have to say yay in order for this to become a reality.
So technically, under the law, yes. However, because we're a school district meeting and we're a receiver, actually, the organization doesn't matter, it doesn't even matter. Because we're the receiving district, our school board actually has the statutory capability of just approving a tuition contract, That's not what the school board wanted to do. They wanted to put it to the town and ask the town for the support in it. So, but yes, we're now in a position where both towns need to agree to that agreement in order for it to be in full force.
You said you had a meeting with Winchester a while back. How was this received there? Was it a positive
Yes,
outcome at the end of this meeting?
at the public hearing, yes. And the board voted for the agreement to move forward. There were a few moms and parents who really would like to have seen more choice for their students as opposed to, so 80% of the public high school students in Winchester will be required to come here, which means we'll invoice for 80%. So 20% of those students will have the opportunity to select another school. They were hoping for more choice. They wanted more students to be able to choose a school other than Hinsdale. And in order for us to find a good financial balance, 80% was the magic number.
Okay. And then, I guess my last question, if I don't forget it here, is, I don't know, lost it. Good luck. Thank you.
I wish you all good night. My back's killing me, I gotta leave, and I'm a Vietnam vet.
Thank you.
Thank you. April, do you want to ask me more?
Kind of echoing a little bit of what do you know? Joe Bogio said. I'm sure you guys have all, I know, there have probably been countless hours put into this planning and all that. But I'm just more concerned, not financially, it sounds obviously like it could be potentially very good for us and offer Winchester some opportunity and voice. I can't believe you guys didn't have representation in team. That's wild. But just looking forward to the future, and when I was in high school here, you know, of course Winchester had their high school, but we were very much rivals. And I know it's not so much that case now because Winchester's been going to Keene for so long, but I'm hoping that maybe there could be some, and I hate to say sports, but chances, you know, for the kids to get together, not just visiting here on campus, but some kind of type of event where the kids can get together, make sure we purposely mix the Winchester and Hinsdale students up so that they are kind of forced to interact and not be pitted against each other, because I think there's a lot of potential for that in the beginning. So just opportunities like that. That's just an example. Thank you.
So it just so happens that we've begun discussing how our two middle schools can co-op in athletic programs over the course of the year. So middle school students from both communities will participate, practice, and compete with each other on several levels of teams. So by the time they arrive here, they will have had however many years they've been together to get to know each other just from an athletic perspective.
Right, and academically, that would be great too. You know, I read in Roth's newsletter every week, and you know, the recent math competitions and representations, that type of thing for both, you know, towns to come together. Be great.
Does anybody else in-house have any questions? We are Zooming, so we're gonna ask them if they have any questions.
Alex, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Not at this time. Thank you.
Amanda?
You're muted. That way you can hear.
I was muted down there. Oh, there's some time. Donna, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Let me try again just in case. Alex, do you have any questions or comments to share?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't have any questions. I'm sorry. I said that the first time, but it must not have unmuted me.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, sir.
Thanks. And Amanda? Nope. Thank you. Nope, that's everybody.
So if there are no other questions or comments, we're going to close the public hearing meeting and recess for about 10 minutes, and then we'll start our school board meeting. So thank you again for everybody for coming and all the comments, and it's great to hear.